Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, for everyone who's watching. This afternoon, what I wanted to talk about was the Alec Baldwin incident. For anyone not familiar with the Alec Baldwin incident, for anyone who hasn't heard of it, who's been living under a rock, because it's been all over mainstream media and news, Alec Baldwin was on the set filming his movie Rust, a Western movie. There was an incident with a firearm. The firearm discharged, seriously injuring one person and leaving another person deceased. So a very major issue. Alec's making all kinds of claims that it wasn't his fault, that he didn't pull the trigger. We'll go into why that is not so. But there's been a lot of talk on internet chat groups and forums and whatnot. Some people are saying it's not Alec's fault at all. You know, there was the armourer who should have checked everything safe. It was their job. And to a degree, yes, that is true. It is the armourer's job to make sure it's safe and everything, and we'll go into that. And some people are saying Alec is guilty. He's guilty of manslaughter. He's guilty of a lack of duty of care and negligence. My personal belief is I believe the latter, that he is guilty of negligence, and he is guilty of manslaughter, obviously, because someone passed away, and that he does hold quite a certain amount of responsibility for what has happened, despite the fact it was the armourer's job to check. Because at the end of the day, firearm safety is everybody's responsibility. If you get handed a firearm, it is your responsibility when you receive that firearm to know the condition of what that firearm is in. Condition just being another word for state, whether the firearm is unloaded, loaded or chambered. It's very important you should know that. The person handing you the firearm should be telling you what state the firearm's in. You should be asking what state it's in, especially if they haven't told you. And more importantly, you should be checking. So we're going to break this video up into two parts. I'm going to look at, firstly, firearm safety rules and why they are so important, where Alec deviated from these rules, what's happened. Then we'll look at some proper handling of firearms, so you see how to safely operate and use, check firearms, which will further highlight what Alec Baldwin should have done, what everybody receiving a firearm and handling a firearm should do, and why it really is negligence, because all of this was missed. So firstly, the rules of firearm safety. The first thing is, never point your firearm at anything you are not willing to kill or destroy. By virtue of the fact that the firearm discharged, a projectile hit someone, seriously injured one person and left another deceased, it's fair to say that this rule was broken. The firearm was pointed in the direction of people. The second rule of firearm safety is always assume your firearm is loaded. You know, never assume that your firearm is unloaded. The most dangerous firearm will always be the empty firearm. Now I say that because by reports, Alec was, some people say, rehearsing his scene. Others I've heard reporting he was goofing off and playing around, which you should never do with firearms. Don't treat them as toys. And prop firearms on movie sets are real firearms. People are getting into this debate that, oh, it was a prop. A prop can still fire a real projectile. It's a real gun. It's just something used. Okay, but the thing with the safety is that, you know, the most dangerous gun, as I was saying, is the unloaded gun. Because you assume it's unloaded, you assume it's safe, and then you start goofing off and doing stupid stuff, and you see what's happened with Alec. Now, regardless of whether he was rehearsing or goofing off is irrelevant, he's assumed it's unloaded. He's assumed it's unloaded, and he's believed it's unloaded because he's possibly not been told the condition of his firearm. He's probably not asked the condition of his firearm, and I dare say it stands to reason then that the other person, or Alec himself, has not physically checked the condition of the firearm. The third rule of firearm safety is always keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready to fire. So that means when you're drawing, your finger should be parallel with the slide. And then when you have the firearm drawn and you've presented it, your finger should still be off the trigger. until you're ready to fire. Then it comes on. Again, Alec has obviously broken this rule. Okay, the firearm has fired. I don't buy into the fact that it fired without him pulling the trigger, because by reports what he was using was a single action revolver, meaning he had to pull the hammer back on the firearm and pull the trigger. So he couldn't have pulled the trigger and had the hammer fire. So it stands to reason he has pulled the trigger. And the last rule of firearm safety is know your target and know what's behind it, or know your backdrop. That means know what your threat is, or what you're pointing the firearm at, and know the surroundings and what's especially behind that target. You know, is there anything you don't want to hit? People, buildings, anything. You know, you've got to think of things like, what if you miss your shot? What if the projectile over penetrates and goes through the body and then hits an innocent person behind the person you're firing at? So just some things to consider. You know, and again, obviously by virtue of the fact that someone has been left deceased and someone was injured, Alec has obviously broken that rule too. So there is all 4 rules where he's failed to follow the basic firearm safety rules. And those rules are there for a reason. They're there because firearms are no joke. They're not a toy, and they can have disastrous, fatal consequences if things go wrong. The safety rules are there in place to reduce the risk so that nothing should go wrong. The fact that he's broken all these rules is just completely irresponsible and negligent, and that's led to the outcome that's happened. Now let's look at firearm safety handling. Now I apologise here. Where I'm at, Melbourne, Australia, we won't use a real firearm because, well, that would probably land me in a lot of trouble. So what we've got is this toy, but we're going to treat the toy by the rule like it's a real firearm and that it's loaded. Now I personally work armed security. Whenever I hand someone a firearm, if I have to, personally I always lock it out. So you look here. That's what would be a slide lock. I have the slide pulled back. I lock it out so that the firearm actually sits like that. I always give people an unloaded firearm empty and have them load it themselves. But when you're either being presented a firearm or giving it to someone else, how it should be presented to you and given is muzzle down, butt forward to the person you're giving it to. That way, if anything was to ever happen, the firearm is pointed in a safe direction, down. If it was ever to fire, it would be down. Now, so when I hand people firearms, like I said, I lock it back, I give it to them, empty, locked out. I will give it to them and say, okay, firearm is cold, unloaded. I would then expect that person, or if anyone's ever handed one to me, whether they tell me the condition of the firearm or not. As a professional, I don't take it personally when they check the firearm. In fact, it should be done. Everybody being handed a firearm should physically check it themselves. That means, you know, if the slide's forward, it means pulling the slide, locking it out. If it's handed to you like that, beautiful. So you look down the magazine well, down the chamber, or down the barrel, sorry. You check in the chamber, stick your finger in, make sure it's empty. Then you can release the slide lock, which will bring your slide forward. Release the pressure on the trigger. Okay, so that would be an empty firearm. Handed like that, empty. The next thing you would have is a loaded firearm. So that means the magazine is in the magazine well. Again, if that was ever presented to you, someone should muzzle down, butt forward, the firearm is loaded. You would receive that firearm. The first thing you should do is pull it out, check that it's loaded, and then just pull the slide back a bit to check into the chamber area. You should see that it's empty. Sorry. So there should be no brass there, no bullet. That means when you pull the trigger, it's not going to fire. There's nothing in there, but the firearm is loaded. It does have projectiles in it, or bullets in it. The other way is if somebody's slide back. Now what you've got is they should, again, safety, muzzle down, butt forward. You would receive it. They should be telling you the firearm is chambered. First thing you would do, again, safely, you check. It's loaded. You would again pull the slide back a bit, but this time in the chamber you should see a bit of brass. That means there is a projectile in the chamber. It means when you pull the trigger, it's going to fire as such. Now, this is what's meant to happen, and when I say firearms is safety is everyone's responsibility, whether someone works with firearms, sporting, recreational, hunting, actors, I don't care. Anyone who handles a firearm should know how to basically operate the basics of operating a firearm and the safety procedures and the rules. Obviously, none of this was done with Alec. I dare say, by virtue of the fact of what's happened, nobody's let anyone know the condition of the firearm. Nobody's checked it properly. And things, there's just been a litany of mistakes that have gone on and on and on. Which is why I say Alec is guilty of negligence. He's been handling a firearm, he's not followed the rules, he doesn't know what condition his firearm is. Whenever you're handling the firearm, it is your responsibility to know the condition of that firearm. If someone hands you a firearm and doesn't tell you the condition of the firearm, it's your responsibility to check and know. If someone says to you, this is the condition of the firearm, cool. But it is still your responsibility to check for yourself and know. Okay, so firearms are no joke. They're not a toy. If you play around and if you're irresponsible, don't follow the rules and don't follow basic safety procedures, eventually there is a likelihood that someone will get hurt. You'll either have a negligent discharge, which is where the projectile fires when it shouldn't. And I don't say accident because I don't believe there's any accidents. For that projectile to fire, it means you've done something that's caused it to fire that's been through negligence because you've not followed the rules and the safety procedures. So I hope that gives you some form of idea as to basic operations of firearms, the firearm safety rules, and gives you a bit more of an idea of why a lot of people are saying that Alec Baldwin is responsible of negligence and manslaughter as such, and how he does bear a certain amount of that responsibility. As does the armourer, because the armourer should have known what was in the firearm, the condition of the firearm. They should have checked it as well. But as I stated, firearm safety is everybody's responsibility. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, you liked it, you think it would help other people or anything, please like, comment, share. Get the video around. Any comments, queries, just leave them in the comment section. I'm happy to answer any and all questions. Thank you for watching. Until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, and please stay safe.